Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to talk about Python variables. In our previous videos, we were able to explain Python syntax, how to use comments, how to use indentations, docstrings, and the rest of them. So in this video, we are moving over to Python variables. First of all, we are going to look at what a variable is. So a variable is like a container that stores data values in computer memory. For instance, let's say you're expecting a set of data from your computer users or from your app users. You know that you're expecting a name, but you do not know what that name is. So that name can be Paul, it can be Peter. So a variable is like a container or a placeholder for that name that you are storing or that you're expecting from your user. You do not exactly know what that name is going to be, but you know that there is a name. So you're telling your computer that a name is coming in. Whatever be the content of that name, please print it out for me or use it to perform this particular function. So in this video, we are going to be learning the following. Well, we already defined a variable. We are going to look at how to create a variable, casting of variables in Python, how to perform multiple variable assignments, outputting variable to the screen. So having said all of this, let us move on to our Visual Studio Code. So welcome back to our code editor. Here we have some of the codes that we use to explain indentation. So for the meantime, I'm going to clear this code so that we can start working with variable. So I'm going to write a comment at the top of this file, how to use variables in Python. So the first item on our list is to learn how to create Python variables. So I'm going to write it as a comment too. So how to create Python variables. So in other programming languages, if you are to create a variable, there are some certain rules that you may have to apply in order to successfully create your variable. For instance, in C, I'm going to again write a comment, how to declare other languages. So if I want to declare a variable in C programming language, what I have to do is to state the data type, something like int. So int means integer. Then I'll write the variable name, maybe age. Maybe you want to declare a variable that will hold the age of your users. And then you are going to set it to a value. If you already have a value for that age, so probably you already have a value for that age, you set it to a value, maybe 25. And let's give another example in JavaScript. So if you are to declare a variable in JavaScript, there are some keywords you might have to use. So you might have to use something like var, and then you call the variable name to tell JavaScript that, okay, this is a variable. So assuming you are declaring age again, age, and then you set it to 25 as well. So these are the examples of how these things are done in other programming languages. But when it comes to Python, none of these rules apply. So in Python, when you want to declare a variable in Python, you do not have to state maybe the data type, or you do not have to use any keyword to state that you are declaring a variable. The only thing you have to do is just to write the variable name and assign it to whatever you want to assign it to. So in Python, when you use equal to, when you just write 1 equal to, you are saying that the value on your left, please take the value on your right to be your value. Do you understand? So you are not exactly equating the two of them. We are just assigning this other value to the other value. Now, what we are going to do now is that we are going to declare a Python variable. And how do we achieve that? So I'm going to zoom out my screen a little bit so that you'll be able to follow me accordingly. So how are we going to achieve this? We are going to achieve that by writing something like stating the variable name, like we did in our former video. We are going to call this variable my name or name. So you just assign it to anything you want to assign it to. So I'm going to assign it to a string, and I'm going to assign it to my name. So my name is Perpetua, and voila, this is a variable. Name here is a variable. So when you hover on this, it is telling you that okay, this object here is a variable. So that is the way to declare a variable in Python. Now, Python variable can hold any data type. I will just briefly explain that here. It can hold a string, it can hold numbers, boolean values. So assuming I want to create another variable that is to hold a numerical value, I can say my age or age. So let's use the same variable age that we were trying to use in C and in JavaScript. So we have something like age equals just a number 25, right? So this time around, you do not even have to enclose it in this because 25 is a number and Python already understands what you are talking about. If I'm writing alphabetical characters and I do not enclose them in my string quote, we are still going to explain that later. But what happens is that Python is saying, please, this perpetual you wrote here, I do not understand it. What is it? Is this a function, or is it a variable, or is it just a piece of text? So for Python to know that, okay, it is just a piece of text, you have to enclose it in that quote. So this is how to declare a variable and or how to create a variable in Python. And unlike other programming languages, something like C, if you are creating a variable, you have to state the data type. You do not have to do that in Python because automatically Python knows the data type that you are representing. So again, I'm going to create another variable that will hold a Boolean value. So I am going to check a fact. That is just going to be my variable name fact. And I'm going to set it to either true or false. It's just a piece of information. For instance, my name is Perpetua, and that is a fact. So is when I say my name is Perpetua, that is a statement of fact. And if it is true, you can say that okay, it is true. And if it is false, you can say it is false. So the value of this particular variable now is a Boolean value. And Boolean values are the types of data that are either true or false. So here we have our fact as a variable and it is taking a Boolean data or a Boolean value. So I'm going to also change this to false. So let's return back to this. So the next topic we are going to look at under variables is casting variables in Python. So I'm going to write another comment, variables in Python. So what does casting mean in Python? Well, like I stated earlier, when you are declaring variable in some other programming language, you might have to indicate the type of data that you're passing into that variable. For instance, like we have in C here, in this C example, assuming I want this thing to be a character, I will just write something like char, and then I'll pass it to, well, a string. So I might say age is, or name, Perpetua. So when you want to do something like that in Python, the reason is not because you want to be explicit that, okay, this variable is this data type. So the only reason you might have to do that is probably because you are probably envisioning that your users are not going to enter the correct data type that you expect them to enter. So you might sometimes state those data types on the variable value, right? So that whatever they enter, the variable will be automatically converted to the data type that you're expecting in your program. So, for instance, for the age variable, I'm expecting an integer, right? A number. And I state my variable here, age, and I set it to 23. Well, this particular method is the normal way of creating your variable. But probably if you think that there is a need to specify, you can do something like int and then enclose the value of that variable inside a parenthesis, right? So right now, assuming I pass in something like, maybe when I'm entering the data, I entered something like 2, and I close it in this parenthesis, right? If I'm to write print age and save and then run the program, well, I'm seeing just 2 as an integer. Let's say I remove this casting. For instance, you are inserting this particular data in your database, and the field states explicitly that the number that will be the value that will be passed in here is an integer, and you pass in something like this into that database, it is going to reject it because what is expected is an integer and you're passing in a string. Okay, so that is the use case of this casting. So assuming what I have here is 2 as a number, and I'm expecting a string. So if I want to convert it to a string, this is how to do it. String, and then I pass in the value. So assuming my database is expecting a string and I'm passing in a number, the best way to convert whatever that is here that is coming in to a string is to use this str method, and then it converts whatever data that you have inside this parenthesis to the data type that you're expecting. So we are going to save this again, and then we are going to run. And again, it prints 2 for us. So assuming that we have, let's change this to 25 so that we know that something is actually happening, and save. So this time around, we have 25. Now, there are other data types and how to use them for your casting. If you want to state that you are expecting an integer, you just write this 3 letters int. If you are expecting a string, you just write this str. If you're expecting a boolean, you write something like bool. If you're expecting a floating value, you write something like float. So now this float is another wonderful way that we can use to demonstrate this casting. So if I change this thing here to float, right? This value, a floating value, is a decimal value. So if I want to convert this, let's say I'm expecting a float, I'm not expecting a whole number, I am expecting a decimal value, and somebody passes in a whole number for me. Now, if I want this 25 to print as a floating value for me, I will just cast it with the float method, and here now it has 25.0. It has automatically converted the value 25 to 25.0, which is a decimal. So another data type that we are going to use and demonstrate this casting is complex number. So complex number is another data type in Python, and it's just a number that has both numbers and maybe a alphabet. So let's add complex to our data type that we can use for casting, and let's cast this 25 to complex. So let's save it and run it. Now 25 here is printed as a complex number. I hope we now understand this casting better. So another point that we are going to be looking at in variable declaration is that when you are declaring your variables are case sensitive. So now we have age, and also I'm going to create another variable here called age and assign it to, well, let's say 30. And I'm going to print two things. I'm going to take this print statement here to the bottom here. I'm going to print age, and I am going to print another one, age, and the second variable, age, with capital letter, and then I will save. So let's run this. Here now we have the two variables printed. So the first age, we started with small letter a, knows that okay, this is my value, and then the second variable with capital letter A also knows its own value. So variables are case sensitive. When you declare your variable with capital letters, you cannot call them with small letters, and when you declare them with small letters, you cannot call them with capital letters. So the next topic that we are going to be looking at in variable is how to assign multiple values to a variable, or multiple variables to multiple values on the same line. How to perform multiple variable assignment. Now, don't get confused. What it means is that in Python, you can assign one variable to multiple values. Say let's say I want to assign fruit variable to multiple values. So here I have orange, apple, and banana. So I'm going to print fruit here. So let's save this and run. And here I have my orange, apple, and banana. So I want to print the first member of that list, and I will save. And here, well, here I have just orange. So if I want the second value to be printed, well, I will just pass the number one index and save. And here I have apple printed for me. And if I want the third member of that list or that assignment to be printed, I'll enter two and save here, and then I will print. And here I have banana. So let's clear our output because our terminal is getting congested. Now, another thing that we can do is to assign a variable to a list. We declare a list by enclosing your data in a square bracket. Okay, so this works the same way. So for instance, I want to print fruits now. It works the same way, and here I have my fruits as well, a list of banana, apple, and all that. So if I, just like we did in our former code, if I want to print the first member, I start with index 0 and then I save, and again I have my orange printed. So I'm going to clear my output. So this what happens. This is how you can assign one variable to multiple values. Now, we can split this orange, apple, and banana into multiple values by assigning this list to three different variables. So I'm going to say that this orange, apple, and banana is going to be fruit 1, fruit 2, and fruit 3. Right? So if I print here, if I just print fruit 1 and save, so I run it, and here I have just orange because these multiple assignments have been able to decode that the first member is for fruit 1, the second member is for fruit 2, and the third member is for fruit 3. I hope this makes sense and that you understand this very clearly. So the next thing that we are going to be looking at is how to output our variables to the screen. So outputting variable to the screen or variables to the screen is simply, well, how to print out your variable on the screen. Well, we have been printing our variables on the screen right from our past 2 to 3 videos. So right now, we already have some of our variables printed on the screen in this video, but there are some basic operations that we want to look at, and that is why we are treating this. Okay, so we have a couple of variables already declared. We have the age, facts, name, and we have the fruit variables declared. So for instance, I want to print more than one variable at the same time. I can just write my print statement. Let's say I want to print age, my name, my age, and then my favorite fruit. So I'm just going to print name, and here I have it, comma, and then I'm going to write age, and then I'm going to write, well, we already know that these fruit, that their values are the respective values of these list indexes. So I'm going to probably print, well, what's my favorite fruit? Fruit 3. So I'm going to print fruit 3. So if I save this code and run it, here I have, well, my name, Perpetua, and well, I have the age with complex number because the age variable here with small letter is set to a complex number. So I'm going to change this to the age with capital letter so that it will print something more accurate. So I'm going to save and clear the terminal. So here I'm going to run again. I have Perpetua, 30, and banana. So this print statement is just for this. Okay, so there's another way to achieve this by just adding plus, plus, and plus. So right now, we have the arithmetic operator plus added in between all of the variables in the print statement. And here we have, well, an error. And the reason is because we are printing an integer. This age here is an integer, right? And we are printing it a alongside a string. So if we want this to print successfully, what we are going to do is to come here and convert this age here to a string, right? And voila, here we can clear our terminal, save our file, and run this code again. So now we have perpetual 30 banana. But the problem now is that it is joining all of the variables together. It is called concatenation. So this plus sign concatenates strings, okay? So when it comes to string, it concatenates them. But when it comes to numbers, it sums them up, all right? So, but when we are just using our comma in between, well, Python is by default going to add a space in between all of them. I hope this makes sense. So when you are printing strings and integers, please do well to not add them, not use the arithmetic operator plus on them, because when you are doing that, you are concatenating a string and an integer, and that is not going to work. I believe that with this video, you've been able to understand what variables are, how to create them, how to cast variables, the fact that variables are case sensitive and how to declare them appropriately, how to assign multiple variables to a value, multiple variables to multiple values on the same line, and also how to use your list to access multiple variable names. We have also learned how to concatenate variables, specifically string variables, and how to output them on a screen. So thank you so much for watching this video. I will see